On a very rainy day in September, Geoff Jones, the Stoddard Conservation Commission chairman, leads the LCHIP committee and a few of us who have been working hard to make the Little Big Forest happen on a tour of the property. Consisting of 40 acres of trees with several dozens of trees well over 150 years old, and most importantly, 4,000 feet of undeveloped shoreline. In this video, Geoff Jones explains the timeline of the conservation efforts around Highland Lake.
Charles' first reservation in 1978. Then you had the Williams family forest. And then things just kind of snowballed. But the real big one was Andorra Forest in the 1990s, which corresponded with the town effort to protect Crickle Cove from 125 houses that were slated. You had a downfall in the economy, and that was the opportunity that the town needed to be able to seize this, which the Forest Society helped. 2006, the apple of the conservation community's eye, Robb Reservoir, 1,600 acres. Trust of Public Lands led that effort because of all the protected land in town became a magnet. Once Crickle Cove was protected, Sweetwater Land Trust came in and filled the hole in the donut so that the whole northeast part of town would be protected. Part of their purpose for protecting this was for the Forest Society to put a forever wild easement on all the land that flowed into the Pioneer Lake watershed. After a 10-year study by Rick Vanderpool, almost 3/4 of the Purse, Williams, Pioneer Lake, and part of Crickle Cove were put in a forever wild easement. So of the 22,000 acres of protected land, not shown on this map, are 6,000 acres in a forever wild designation. Big part over here and a big part over here in Andorra called Wildcat Hollow. Extraordinary for a town to have private landowners put that kind of a long-term designation on it. So that will be de facto old growth forest in the future. We have a confirmed old growth forest up here in the Williams family forest. 2011, 2012, Sweetwater no longer wanted to own this land, so they were going to give it to the Nature Conservancy. Nature Conservancy didn't want the artificial impoundment that had a 50-acre pond, 2 miles of undeveloped shoreline, one of the best small lake loon nesting habitats in the state is right here. I kind of challenged Sweetwater to not do that because you would lose 2 miles of protected shoreline, which is the one habitat type that is underrepresented in this mosaic of protected lands. Long story short, they wound up offering this to the town along with a $50,000 stewardship fee. So we now have a track record of managing a town forest of significant size that will be similar to how we manage this in terms of public access, trails, etc.
In this next clip, Geoff is explaining the location of the Little Big Forest and why it's important for the wildlife in the area.
So now it comes to the Little Big Forest, this little red area here, which you can see almost looks heart-shaped in the heart of the town physically. That will connect the conservation values of the east side of Highland Lake with those of the west side, because it is so critical for wildlife to be able to have a physical corridor. And people who live over here on the Whitney Road have pictures of moose, deer, bear using this habitat. We have eagles that are coming into this area on a more frequent basis, and they are almost daily seen on the super canopy pines down here on the Little Big Forest. We have loons that are on the lake that nest and raising young. I've seen them in this part of the lake and at the north end of the lake with their young. So it's important that we protect as much of the undeveloped shoreline on this lake as we can. And you can see that it's been pretty hammered.
In this next clip, Geoff is explaining the history of Christopher Robb and his effects on the lake.
Stoddard has a long history of stewardship going back to the 1850s with Christopher Robb, who came into town, built a mill down here, dammed up Island Pond, Highland Lake into this highway. for floating logs to the mill in the summer and transporting on the ice in the winter. When the mill was sold in the 1920s, Public Service Company in New Hampshire bought it all up for hydroelectric purposes for their hydro mill down in Hillsborough. In the 1950s, they sold all that land and converted it into these house lots. And you have up in here in the Washington end, house lots that are 8,000 square feet in size.
In this next clip, Geoff is explaining how purchasing and protecting this 4,000 feet of shoreline and 40 acres of forest will be key to counteracting the development and preventing the death of Highland Lake.
It's almost a death knell for this lake, but I think the ecological lifeline are these forests that are protected, that flow pure water into the lake system, and we have Pickle Cove shoreline protected, and with this being added to it, 10% of the shoreline on Highland Lake can be protected.
In this next clip, Geoff explains how, based on opinions of other professionals such as Tom Wessels, the Little Big Forest is a treasure that needs to be protected and never developed.
But it's more than just shoreline, because when we came out here and started looking at it, there's some extraordinary trees on this property, and it's come to our realization that this area, according to Tom Wessels, who came out here and took a look at it, Tom Wessels, of course, a terrestrial forest ecologist, Antioch College, written a book, Reading the Forested Landscape. He came out here at my request to look at it, to just give his assessment to see if we're on the same page, which we are. He wasn't on the property more than 5 minutes when he turned to me and said, this property's never been cut, never been plowed, and then spent the next 2 hours explaining why.
Here, Geoff explains just how did this treasure of a forest never get developed.
An extraordinary property with what we call kind of an ecological treasure. Right here underneath our nose, did not have the history that the rest of these lands had. This peninsula was under one ownership dating back before the Civil War, which is why Christopher Robb never got it to cut it, and why Public Service Company never got it converted into a house lot.